You're too pretty to be worried. Why are you complaining? You're pretty, you should have no problems getting a man, landing a job, or even catching a break. Society tends to believe that being pretty means you have already made it, that beauty opens all doors. But tonight on Heartlines, we're unpacking the other side of that coin, the downside of pretty privilege. Because here's the truth. When beauty comes or becomes a currency, it can come with a price tag, unfortunately. Objectification, jealousy, misunderstanding, expectations that reduce a woman's identity to just her looks. Now, take for instance Bianca Costa, a Cape Town-based influencer whose innocent Instagram photo was hijacked by controversial Twitter personality Chris Excel, turning her image into a meme without consent. Suddenly, she found herself the face of very many tweets she didn't write, part of a narrative she didn't choose, all because she was pretty enough to be noticed. So tonight, we're bringing together two phenomenal women and two dynamic men for a raw, real, and nuanced conversation. Joining us on the panel this evening, we kickstart off with Yaya Mawande, who is a model and entertainment industry insider who knows firsthand what it's like to walk into a room and be seen for your face and not necessarily your voice. We will also be joined by Sibabalwe, a powerhouse group CEO of Unorthodox Group, a woman who has proven herself in the corporate space. However, sometimes her appearance overshadows her capacity, and this is in the context of people who are receiving her. And so from the male's perspective, we will be joined by Simphiwe Mabaso, a charismatic video editor with roots in sports and storytelling, who's witnessed how pretty privilege plays out behind the lens and in real life. And then lastly, Karabo Moshoeshoe, an entrepreneur and author, who'll speak to us on what it is like to navigate relationships and the perceptions around beauty, and how pretty privilege affects not just the women, but also the men around them. Let's say good evening to our guests. So we'll start with Simphiwe Mabaso. Good evening, Simphiwe. Welcome to Heartlines. As we try to get a hold of Simphiwe, let's say hello to Karabo Moshoeshoe. Karabo, are you joining us this evening?
I'm here. Good evening. How are you doing?
Fantastic. So if you were to describe or define pretty privilege, what would it be?
It's just having an advantage over other people because of your natural appearance. We have had people had privileges, whether they based on their voices, they stand up and become singers, or people that are actors, they stand out of people. And unfortunately, when it comes to natural gifting, there's people that have pretty privilege and they actually just get ahead of the line above everybody else. So that's one thing that we realize along life's journey, that you realize that actually it works. And that's the unfortunate part, and that's a shallow way of thinking about life, but that's the reality that we face with.
Simphiwe, I understand that you're on the line. Welcome to Heartlines. I'm going to ask you the very same question. What would you define as pretty privilege?
Hi, sorry for joining late. Had some issues. Pretty privilege. I think I can agree with the man. It's pretty much based on how you look aesthetically, how people treat you aesthetically, and if you are seen as more pretty or hot or whatever, you kind of get favors. You don't go through things that other people go through. By other, I mean people that are less pretty or whatever. You know what I mean? So you could get away with certain things just because someone else sees you as like maybe pretty or hot or whatever it is.
Fair statement. I want to turn to Miss Sibabalwe. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Your take, do you think that pretty privilege warrants you favors that the next wouldn't be able to access?
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Yes, there is such a term as pretty privilege because it's something that exists But in as much as it has its pros, it also definitely has its cons. And I think at the end of the day, it is really up to the person who is so-called pretty, how they actually use it. You can't control how it's received, but definitely it's up to you to control how to use it. So the term exists, it's got its pros and cons out. That would be my opinion.
And lastly, a woman who knows not only how to beautify herself, but how to beautify others. Yaya, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Heartlines. For somebody who is notable for making women look beautiful, have you seen the perks that come with that kind of advantage?
Thank you for having me. This one is a tricky one because I'm obviously on the receiving end and the latter. It does. However, because I work with my looks as a model, I think a lot of the time I am subjected to people's opinions because I work with the way that I look and vice versa with the women that I work with.
All right, we've gotten a feel of the roundtable discussion. We're going to segment this. I'm pretty sure you are all made aware of the reality that we'll have this in a fold style session. And so what we will do is we will allow Simphiwe and Karabo to have the first 15 minutes of this conversation. And ladies, I want you to be attentive. I want you to be listening, because at the end of the day, I do believe that it is the men that hold the currency, but it is the women that experience the down end of pretty privilege. I know that Karabo has also a different take to that very statement, and so we'll get into that. And so I want you to listen attentively, because you're going to come back with your rebuttal or perhaps even your agreeance to what is being said. Let's take off for the very first 15 minutes of this conversation. If you've just joined us, welcome to it. Pretty privilege is the conversation. Does it exist? Does it not? Should we be frowning? Should we be smiling? Should we be strategic in how we use the said pretty privilege? Let's speak to Simphiwe. Simphiwe, here's the thing. Pretty is in the eyes of the beholder. If I think of pretty, there is the reality that not everybody is going to be everyone's cup of tea. But also, we have status quos. We have societal norms that we've sort of conformed to say, at this very stage, certain person X is the standard of beauty or prettiness, if you will. In your experience as a videographer, as somebody who's worked behind the lens, let's talk about how women are leveraging off that, just in your view and your experiences.
Yeah, well, in my view, and in the industry, I mean, pretty much what happens is you'll have a beautiful woman, or aesthetically more appealing. They tend to get like a lot of jobs, if you must, because you find that in the industry there's a lot of it's a sort of a male dominated industry, and people kind of what is it, they gatekeep, and they use their power to use these girls that have these pretty women. They use them to kind of give them jobs and whatever, because it's much, how do I put it, they don't really have, some of them don't really have a lot of credit behind their names, but they're used to getting away with everything because they're beautiful, right? So you'll find a situation where you have a beautiful girl who doesn't even know, for example, how to, for lack of a better word, reason. They're not the most articulate person or someone that you need for a certain position, but because they are pretty, and because you've got this manager who owns this production company, they will speak to those girls, and because they want to get what they want, they'll come to some kind of conclusion. And you find that a lot of pretty women then get jobs, then get this, then get that, because there's guys out there that use their power or even wealth to amass attention from these kind of women.
Karabo, I'll tilt over to you. If pretty privilege is some kind of currency that's being used, what are you getting in exchange? Because here's the thing. We're saying that women who perhaps sometimes don't have the prowess of that particular industry are being allowed into that space. What's being exchanged here?
Honestly speaking, it's just monopoly currency. There's really nothing to be exchanged until something's agreed upon. When Simphiwe is speaking about the part where some people get jobs because of how they look, I can confess when I was in corporate many years ago, when I used to do recruitment, used to meet a lot of candidates. And honestly, there's a point where I appointed somebody based on how they looked. And not that I really wanted their skills, and I just appointed them based on appearance. And honestly speaking, there were candidates that were better than that applicant, but for the fact of she appeared in a certain way. And this is a psychological thing to understand that with men feed with their eyes. Men are the weaknesses are activated through the eyes, and with females, it's the opposite of they get attracted to what they hear. So along the years, there has been a trend of men having falling weakness to beautiful men. And as much as you see your bottle girls within the clubs, you'll see it's just pretty girls. You'll see whenever you go to clubs, it's pretty girls that get the drinks. That's the weakness of men along the years. So I got reminded of a conversation I had with a sports journalist friend of mine. There was a position available at a certain sports channel, and it was actually a beauty queen. I won't mention names before I get sued. A beauty queen was given the platform to actually host the shows, and they actually complained to say that we're journalists and we have gone to school, we got degrees to be journalists, and they appointed this person based on their achievement on social media. And this is where the privileges stood out to say that we appointed this person because this person attracts viewers because of how they look. So it's really an issue that has been coming along the years, and it's something that doesn't seem to be going away because it's getting worse and worse and worse. And also looking at the current situation when it comes to the lifestyle in South Africa, the blessed lifestyle is not going away. The prettier you are, the more men you'll get. The prettier you are, the more jobs you'll get. I'm reminded of a scene from one of the books that I've written is when I got a call to say that please come speak about this thing on our show. Is that, you know what, I've got exactly what I wanted to talk about. Is that on part of the books is that there is a law firm, and this head of this law firm was looking for a PA, and he appointed a PA based on how she appeared, rather than experience with the other candidates. And this happened to have now made him now fall into a sequence of sexual assaults, sexual issues that result in sexual assault. And this was only purely based because this person appointed them purely because of their appearance. And that was purely fictional. Thank you.
Karabo, I want to stick with you for a second. So you firstly, extensive, beautiful response there, just detailing out how it manifests in different spaces. You were just sharing your own personal experience as a recruiter, and I'm trying to gauge what did you benefit from giving the girl who looks better the job? Does that make sense? I think from the end and the perspective of someone who is listening, who is trying to gauge how this men feeding with their eyes manifests in different spaces, you kind of want to understand a recruiter doesn't have access to the candidate. You know, it's a touch and go situation, right? My understanding is that you're going to pass on the candidate to the company, and the company needs to then suss out whether or not they think this person is fit. And so in that instance, what was the end game?
At the time, honestly, there wasn't. And I was actually the recruiting manager. So that person was going to report to me. So I think it was just a matter of having this beautiful person working next to me. There was actually no plan behind it. There was no reasoning behind it. It was just a matter of I had to choose between A and B, and I chose B because B looked prettier. There was no mathematics to it. There was no science to it. That was just purely as shallow as it is. So I purely appointed that person because they look prettier. And I, in retrospect, I look at that person's career that I didn't appoint. I would have taken them better with their career than the one that I appointed. But unfortunately, it happened. And unfortunately, that's life.
Simphiwe, it's back to you. Feeding with your eyes. Good and kind, sir. for 10, 12, and 16.3 marks. What does that mean? Is that a body thing? Is it a face? Is it because I clean up well? What's the context?
So what Karabo just said reminds me of something I heard. It goes. I can't be too sure, but it goes something like men like what they see, and that's why women wear makeup. Women like what they hear, and that's why men lie. Right? It sounds a bit funny, but just thinking about it takes me to that. Like 8 out of 10 times, women or guys will always be attracted to, I don't know, nice women or beautiful women. And the thing is, it depends on guy to guy. You know, some people would say hire someone because, like Karabo said right now, he just had to choose between A and B, and he went for the prettiest one. Someone else will go for something different. But I think what makes the biggest point of this thing becomes that every time you're in a situation where you have to, I don't know, choose between two, right? In this case, we're talking pretty privilege and not so pretty or whatever. 8 out of 10 times, because even as a guy yourself, you want a hot girlfriend, a beautiful girlfriend, you kind of go with the same frame, even in hiring or in recruiting or what have you, because it's just somehow fundamentally stuck in our heads.
And with that being said, if you've just joined us, thank you so much for choosing us over the rest. This is Heartlines. Sheila Ndikumana, joined by an amazing panel of folk. Currently on the line, we have Simphiwe Mabaso, who is a charismatic video editor, and he has his roots in sports and storytelling. And alongside Simphiwe, we have Karabo Moshoeshoe, an entrepreneur and author, who is helping us navigate the realities of pretty privilege, not just in the context of it being a woman's experience, but also such as a man's experience. Karabo, let me come back to you. This currency that sometimes has no mathematics, has no science. It is just what it is, you know. Men want to see pretty things, and it so happens that women happen to be those beautiful people that they can lay their eyes on. With that being said, do you think there's a mincing, a diminishing, if anything, a derogatory look on women's capacity, capabilities?
That's very true. I think that's why from the onset I call it a shallow way of thinking. And once you mature in life and you realize that what steps you applied in doing certain things because how a certain person looked, that is where the problem is. I can recall many men lost good partners because they found a better looking partner, but they had a better partner, and then in retrospect they saw that actually they lost out on a good thing. Same with what I on the highway of regret that I'm on, to say that had I worked with a certain somebody, I would have then uplifted their career because they were a better choice between the two. And in that we have this thing of where a person that's pretty, we tend also to just dumb them down, to say that maybe they got to where they are because they're dumb. And then we have to actually always second guess the pretty people. If you're pretty, you have to listen attentively. And to say that, did she get where she is because of how she looks or what she has? So it's a way of thinking that needs really to be gotten rid of, because of we tend to want to apply this thing to in each every situation, in relationships, in family, in whatever. Where a person is prettier, they will listen to them. They will listen to them and they will make their point. And unfortunately, sometimes those points that don't make sense. But because they stand out, that is where the issue is. You know, some time ago, I saw a clip of Trevor Noah where they were invited to a party by Jay-Z and Beyonce, and they were staying in a queue. And he said it was celebrities from all walks of life, like people that had achieved whatever they had achieved, Grammy winners, Oscar winners. They were standing in a queue to go into this party. And then sneaking, there's a car that stops, and then everybody stops, and everybody gets pushed away from the line. And who steps out? It's Jennifer Lopez, and then she walks right through the line and she walks right in. And they stood there dumbstruck to say that, why is she better than us? Why is she walking in ahead of us? And those are the things that we sometimes see, that they get ahead of the line because of how they look. But unfortunately, when you look at it, there's a contour there to say that also the pretty people, they get then left out in decision making because they said, when are you just a bimbo, pretty face with no brains? And then that's where now women get left behind in the corporate world because of how they look, because of it will be perceived that they got to where they are because of they slept with somebody or because they're pretty, whatever the case is. And that's the mentality that we need to really shift and really flush out.
And Simphiwe, lastly with you for our first quarter of the conversation, pretty with no brains. Have you seen women excessively try to display some level of intelligence by virtue of that thought process?
Yes, I can certainly agree. Here's something I was discussing with some friends of mine that they are pretty women, very beautiful women that because they're used to speaking to, first of all, when they speak to women around them, they generally feel like they are better looking. So they tend to think that they are smarter, right? It's not with every woman. Of course, there's exceptions to the rule, but because most people tend to agree with them in their life, they favor them because they are pretty. And as a result, they miss it. And I think it's a flaw of pretty privilege. They miss that element of learning because let's say if she's speaking to a guy and she says anything, this guy is most likely going to agree with her. No matter what she says, he's not going to question anything because she's pretty and he wants her. So he agrees to every single thing she says. He, even though he can tell that, man, come on, this is not making sense, right? But he agrees. Why? Because she's beautiful and he wants her in whatever way. Therefore she goes around, or she starts living a life where no one ever questions what she says. No one ever questions what she thinks. No one ever says, no, you're wrong. That's not right. Because everyone around her wants to be closer to her. The girls want to be around her because that means the boys are going to come. The boys are going to want to be around her because, she's beautiful. It's going to upgrade his status, their status, and all of that. So you start to live in a world where you find a group of pretty women, not to say that they don't have brains, no, but you find a lot of them that leverage their beauty. All they are used to speaking is with their bodies and their pretty privilege. And so when you start to get into discussions of other topics, they don't really know much about it. And because they are used to being correct or being favored wherever they go, even when you question them, they get offended. Pretty women don't even know how to take like rejection, for example, because they can't understand how come this guy doesn't want me. He must be gay. He must be broke. He must be this. They just, it doesn't make sense. It's a mind boggle. Like, how come he doesn't want me when everyone else does?
Yeah.
I mean, they don't understand that Natia's guys, they're pretty privileged. Some of us also are what we are, And yeah, so those are some of the flaws that I think I've come across more in a social context, though.
Absolutely. The voice there of Simphiwe Mabaso joining us, a charismatic video editor. And then we had Karabo Moshoeshoe, an entrepreneur and author. The first segment of this pretty privilege conversation just checked out, and we're going to have an opportunity to speak to Yaya and Sibabalwe, who are going to be joining us to share the woman's perspective. If you want to send through your questions, find us on WhatsApp +27 6340 69126. A quick breather for now.
When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk. Channel Africa, the best nighttime radio. Hotlines, 10 p.m. to midnight, Central African Time, with Sheila Ndikumana.
It is 10 minutes, or rather, a minute before 11 p.m. Central African Time. I'm looking at a different clock. Listen, if you've just joined us, we're currently discussing pretty privilege in all contexts, in all its facets. The downside to pretty privilege is predominantly the factor that we're looking at. And joining us to give us the woman's end and perspective is Yaya Mawande, who's joining us, a model and entertainment industry insider, alongside Sibabalwe, who's joining us, a powerhouse group CEO of Unorthodox Group. And so, Yaya, quite a bit was said, right? I want to get into the thicket of it.
First of all, Karabo, where were you when I was doing all my castings? Because I would probably be so far in my career if you were part of the directors. Because what is pretty? Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? I have been in the industry for 11 years now.
Yeah.
I've been doing for 11 years. I'm obviously a plus size model. I still struggle to work with brands that I feel like are well within my accolades as a model that's been working for 11 years, is pretty associated with skinny. You know what I mean? Are brands, considering pretty as what men see as pretty, this beautiful skinny girl. What about us who have beautiful faces but a relatable body? So what is pretty?
This is a brilliant question, but we are giving an opportunity for you, in actual fact, and Sibabalwe Sesmani to divulge and share your thoughts and views. And I want to get it into the thicket of what was said. Sibabalwe, listen, the last statement that sort of stung, and I say stung because I thought about it and I was like, wait a minute, this must be a real context for men, right? Pretty women do not know how to be rejected. They do not know how to receive rejection. For me, this sounds like a general woman's experience, because for the most part, we're not doing the asking, if anything. Right, contextually. And I'm thinking relationships, I'm thinking romance, I'm thinking in the boardroom, you're not going there trying to ask, you're going there trying to show what it is you're capacitated with, what it is you're capable of. And so what's your take on that statement?
Okay, just a minor correction. It's Sibabalwe with the E at the end. Just that correction. I do wish that we had started the conversation off with women, seeing as it's Women's Month in South Africa. And I mean, pretty privilege can be extended to both male and female, but it seems as though in this conversation it's women. So I really wish you could have started with us, since we are the ones that face or benefit from this sort of discrimination. I mean, yeah, that comment did sting. I think you probably saw Yaya, the look on Yaya's face. She's my cousin, so I know exactly what she's thinking just by looking at her face. And we are basically thinking the same thing with that women that are attractive don't know what rejection is. By women, and especially by being Black women, we at the bottom of the barrel according to decision making and any economic empowerment. So you can't say that we're not used to rejection. And I really don't think it hurts us that badly to get rejected by men. It's really not in the greater scheme of things. But what I'm picking up is that there's such a negative connotation with using your looks. That for me is so smart. Why must I do what everyone is doing if I can see that my looks are going to get me somewhere? That's leveraging. That is actually so smart. And that is the concept that we constantly being told. Work smart and not work hard. So for me, it's weird. You know, men are allowed to use their male privilege, but women aren't allowed to use their pretty privilege. It boggles my mind, because that in itself is smart. If I don't have to give you stats and pull up a graph and a report, I can just simply smile and say, well, you know, I do a great job at this contract. And you give me the contract and I service the contract. If it's within a business sense, why not? I'm cutting down the time. I'm using my pretty privilege. As long as I'm delivering, I'm invoicing at the end of the day. Why must I work hard when I can work smart? So I think there's a lot that we need to think about it. There's a lot of perspectives that we need to shift around pretty privilege. And also, you know, women know the negative side of pretty privilege. You know, things are brought up, and there's always an insinuation that pretty women are dumb, or if you're smart, you must look a certain way. And I mean, some of the things that were said, that women wear makeup to impress men, when we really love makeup and we want to look good for ourselves. There's a lot, and this pretty privilege just seems to have a lot that's centered around men, when it's really not like that. There's so much that women do for themselves, by themselves, and not for the attention of men. But if men fall into this honey trap, then you fall into it as your fault. You were not born this way. You didn't mold yourself or craft yourself into this way. So it's a very interesting conversation. Also hearing the perspective of men. There are a few things that were triggering that were said, but I'm sure we'll get into a bit of, that's
Yeah.
how, like, I know my cousin right there, she made a face and I knew exactly what she was thinking. There are a lot of triggering, I think, questions and also answers to what is being said.
What's really interesting, Sibabalwe, is we started with the men because we wanted a full view of these, or of the individuals that give the currency, right? Pretty privilege is not something that women give each other. I can acknowledge you're beautiful, right? But I'm not going to open a door for you because you're beautiful. A man will. And that is the reality of the conversation. And so, with that being said, you said something so interesting. You said leverage of your looks. And this is something that we're not talking about, right? We're looking at it as this potential discrimination where you're not going to be heard because you're pretty. So, it's either you choose to look very mundane and get through by being heard, or you choose to look pretty and accept what's offered to you. How do we strategically use looks?
Yeah, is that for me or for Yaya?
That is for you, Sibabalwe.
I think, I won't say that. I think earlier on when we were doing introductions, I did say that pretty privilege has its pros and cons. And Yaya agreed with me then. Like, I mean, I'll take my personal journey in the fact that I've been an entrepreneur for 11 years now, starting off in public relations. And
Sibabalwe, I'm so sorry. I need to interrupt. There is an issue with your sound there. I'm not too sure what's going on. Your sound has switched. If I can just ask the other panelists to mute and let's just gauge if it indeed is Sibabalwe's sound. Could you kindly mute your mics for me? There we go. Perfect. Sibabalwe, you can continue.
Sure. So I mean, we were saying earlier, and I did mention earlier that there's pros and cons of pretty privilege. So I'd use my personal experience because I don't, like generalizing based on others. With my personal experience, I've been an entrepreneur now for close to 11 years in October. And when I first started out, being pretty was actually a con to me because I would prepare for hours on end for a meeting, and then once you get into the meeting you talk about work for 5 minutes, and then the rest of the time this man is trying to convince you to have the rest of the meeting in his hotel room because he's married and he obviously can't take you to his house where his wife is. So right then and there you make a decision: am I sleeping with this man? And then in me sleeping with him, am I even getting the contract? He's going to sleep with me, then I'll be ghosted. But we actually don't even get into the meat of the project. No one cares about the hours that you put in. So depending on where you are as a person and what decisions that you take, and I will not judge any girl, who would choose the latter over the other. Each to their own. It depends on how you sleep at night. But then if you decide to be morally correct, you will be broken. You will lose out on contracts, which is exactly what happened initially with me when I started off in PR. Interestingly enough, I started a sports agency 5 years ago, and we are one of the first sports agencies in the country to commercialize athletes off the field. And, working in male-dominated space because we predominantly work in rugby because we work with national players of the rugby team. It's interesting how the more I leaned into my femininity and into my pretty privilege, things were so much easier. The behaviors changed. I wasn't fighting as hard, but that's what got me into the rooms. And then what's made me stay in those rooms and excel in those rooms as being a Black young woman in a white male-dominated sport is the content that I had. So on a strategic point, if you have it, you have it. And if you can see how the world or the men or the women actually also react to it, because they are, and as much as another woman would acknowledge another pretty woman, but some women want to be friends with other women just because they're pretty and the benefits that they might come with them. Or, we bond over, oh, your makeup is so nice. I love how you do your makeup. I love how you do your hair. And then that's what introduces the friendship. And then what sustains it is then the content. So there is strategic ways to go about using your pretty privilege, just like any other privilege, whether it's male privilege, whether it's white privilege. But it really just depends on how you use it. But it definitely has its pros. It definitely has its cons as well. And I mean, as women, it's up to us how you use it as a tool.
Yeah, I want to turn over to you. Have you seen relationships being formed because of prettiness? So women coming together, forging genuine relationships that initially kicked off because they were both beautiful?
Not in my experience, and I'm saying this because, like I said in my initial question, what is the definition of pretty? Because I represent plus size women, right? And plus size women are not necessarily regarded as pretty, We have so much more to prove because we're plus size. The women that are in my life, fortunately, are very beautiful women. I'm surrounded by very beautiful women, but I don't think our looks is necessarily what brought us together initially. I think it was experience and just energies coming together. I don't go out of my way to become friends with girls just because they're pretty, because being beautiful on the outside is one thing, but what matters to me is the inside.
Yaya, you keep on asking the very same question. What is pretty? Let me turn that question to you for a second. What do you deem pretty? And I suppose not for yourself, but what have you seen society deem pretty? Because you deal with women on the regular. They come to you and they say, make me look beautiful, make me pretty.
Yeah.
What are they
So
looking for?
not just women, just brands as well. Like, because I'm in the industry, I am surrounded by people who subject women. And because I work in the industry, I see that, what people and the world considers pretty. And it's not a yaya, it's a beautiful, tall, skinny, probably light-skinned woman. And my thing is, what about a yaya? What about a Nandi with dark skin? Still has a beautiful face and a thick body. What about the average African looking woman who's not necessarily pretty, who's not necessarily, let me not use the word pretty, let me use the word skinny and tall. You know what I mean? I think that pretty is very broad. I don't want to take it back to the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, because it really is. But it seems like the beholders, which are men, are mostly focusing on women's body size and not necessarily their faces.
Sibabalwe, no, you have ever so eloquently. Thank you for that. Sibabalwe, I want to turn to you. You have given us an opportunity to look at the context of business through the lens of a woman. You are an entrepreneur. You have had to deal with whether married or unmarried men trying to lure you into private spaces to have their way with you. For somebody who has had time navigating that space, how do you deal with a man who is looking at your pretty? And I say pretty in inverted commas because I don't want us to give definition to what you look like as though we fully understand the capacity of your beauty, right? So how do you deal with a man who's just trying to have his way with your pretty without losing that business deal? Yes, you said that there are some business deals that you will lose. There's some contracts that won't come your way, but there's also a prowess that you have developed in that area. How do you do it?
So that's a bit of a tricky one because initially when you start off in business, I was 22 years old when I started my company. So you can imagine, a 22-year-old then, very different from a 22-year-old now, very insecure. You see this older man who is in a position of power to give you what you think is a big contract at the time, showing an interest. So, you might be scared to say no, but you don't not necessarily going to do anything, maybe entertain, giggle here and there, because you're still thinking that you're very insecure yourself and you're not sure of the value and what you possess. And you may need to have skin in the game. So you may entertain, laugh here and there because you don't want to lose that contract. The extent of it is completely up to you and where you go. But what I found is that the older I've gotten, I have actually shut things down. Walking into a room and find whatever it is that you look like, people may be interested or not interested, but being able to put my foot down and be firm and know the value that I bring to the table, whether I look a certain way or I don't look a certain way. Because at the end of the day, if you are given a contract, it's about you servicing it. What I was saying earlier, it's servicing it, delivering it, because they are also coming to you because you bring value. They need something from you in as much as you need something from them. So getting older and maturing is realizing that, you know what, if I don't get this contract because I didn't meet the certain man's advances, it's actually his loss if he is just basing it solely on the fact that I crushed or bruised his little ego. But so it varies. It really does depend. But women do need to be a bit more firm and not be scared. But unfortunately, as well, we have to come into the reality of the fact that we are living in South Africa as Black women in 2025, where there's an intentionality of locking women out of economic opportunities, which then leads to economic dependence, which then leads to the scourge of GBV that we currently have in our country. So in the business sense, it's very tricky, but you really have to be bold as a woman and put your foot down in situations where you feel as though you looked at in a certain way because of how you look or perceived in a certain way rather than the value that you bring to the table. But it means that mentally you need to awaken to the value that you bring at the table, that you're not begging someone for opportunities. This is a fair trade and exchange of values, that I am a good supplier, that we are having this conversation, and you're a client and I want the financials that you bring in because I need to run a business. So it really just depends on a number of factors. But then those were my experiences over the years in business, and just how I've navigated and grown from that little girl who was 22 to now this girl who is 23.
I love that. The voice of Sibabalwe Esesmani, a powerhouse group CEO of Unorthodox Group, a woman who's proven herself in the corporate space, and you can hear it. So beautiful, bringing through that response concerning navigating pretty privilege in the context of business. Alongside Sibabalwe, we have Yaya Mawande, who joins us. She is a model and she is an entertainment industry insider whose first-hand understanding of what it is to walk into a room and first be perceived for what you look like is so extensive and vast. And they join us as a pair this evening to discuss pretty privilege, the upside, the downside, and everything in between. You can send through your commentary. Find us on WhatsApp +27 63406 9126. We're going to get into a quick breather because it is time for the men to speak. And as we get into that breather, I want you to conscientize yourself with what has been said from both perspectives, because coming and drawing toward the end of the conversation, I will require from each of you, by the way, a parting shot that sort of encompasses what you've heard versus what you understand. For now, let's get into that breather.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802. Channel Africa, where every moment is an African celebration. Feel the energy. Feel the connection. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is 23 minutes after 11 p.m. Central African time. That song titled In the Dark by Alicia Olatuja, taking us to the west of our beautiful African continent. If you've just joined us, listen, pretty privilege is the discussion. We're looking at the highs, the lows, and everything in between, gauging a set of phenomenal women and outstanding men joining us this evening. And we have made it a two-part discussion where there is opportunity to refute, rebut, if you will. But of course, this held in segments. Now we're going to reintroduce Simphiwe Mabaso, who is a video editor, as well as Karabo Moshoeshoe, an entrepreneur and author. And so we are going to get into that conversation with Simphiwe. Are you back with us?
Yes, ma'am. Back.
Just come again there, please. Are we hearing Simphiwe or Karabo?
This is Simphiwe.
All right, Karabo, are you with us? Lovely, lovely. Listen, a lot of things to unpack. Firstly, what's the yardstick for measuring pretty? And I think this was a point that Yaya kept on asking. You know, she kept on bringing to our attention that we really don't know what the gauge for beautiful, pretty is. What is the gauge?
Okay, I'll go first. I think I think when I think Shakespeare came with the term that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I think in life in general, just use this skin deep mentality to say that this is how you're supposed to look. And unfortunately, it has carried over the years. While we've been on a break, I was thinking of some things that we get up to, and I'm just going to confess about business partners and the females. And whenever we have to go into meetings, depending on the audiences, it will depend on who we push forward. And if it's a female audiences, then they would tend to push me because they said, you know, you bring your charm. And now also women are also gravitating to also looking for also pretty men. So pretty women also want pretty men. So in a case where also when the audience is men, then we tend to push the business partners that are female, that are pretty females. And that's the unfortunate part of the human mentality, to say that how then do we define prettiness and beauty? We definitely define it with small minor things, and whether it's a body structure, whether it's a facial appearance. And unfortunately, that is a yardstick that we use. It's as skin deep as you think it is. It is exactly that. It's nothing beyond what a person can offer. It's just a matter of when this person appears, do they attract the crowd or not?
Simphiwe, your take, the barometer for pretty.
Honestly, Karabo said a mouthful and he said it all. I don't know if there's much I can add to that, but what I have noticed is that, like, again, with what he said, we define it differently. You know, some people are face people, some people are boob people, some people are legs people. If you're looking at guys, and it's the same, I suppose, with women. I would like to think that they have certain attributes that a particular group of women could.
Simphiwe, we have lost you there. As we try and get a hold of Simphiwe, I'm going to urge you to send through your commentary, finding us on WhatsApp +27 63406 9126. Simphiwe, are you back with us?
I'm back, ma'am.
All right, please do finish your thoughts, sir.
Yeah. So to define what beauty or pretty is for me, I think would be difficult. But like Karabo said, do we look at this person when they walk into a room? I think, I don't know, even with men, there's a certain guy that can walk into a room and you're like, okay, yeah, okay. You know, you feel his presence. When I'm born, he looks the part, he feels the part. And it's the same with women. You know, you do get women that come into a space and you're like, whoa, you know. And whatever your whoa is, I suppose that gets to differ. Some people like legs, some people like a very hot body. And even with that, what is a hot body? Is it skinny? Is it thick? How do you define it? So there isn't one particular way to say this is what pretty is. I think again we'll go back to beauty's in the eyes of the beholder, but there'll always be like a striking beauty where when one person walks into a room, I think you're like, whoa, you know. So I don't know how we would really classify what's the different kind of pretty or beauty is.
I think just for the purposes of time, we're going to bring this the panel together, meaning we will be introducing Sibabalwe Sesmani, who is a Powerhouse Group CEO of Unorthodox Group, alongside Yaya Mawande, who is a model and entertainment industry insider. Sibabalwe, you look like you found your woe, okay? Right, ma'am? And so I want to gauge you. What do you qualify as pretty?
I think confidence for me is very attractive. I think confidence brings people in, because if you walk into a room and you own it, it really is about energy. Yes, someone can walk into a room and then they don't really own it or claim it at all. And then you kind of think, oh, she looks cute or he's right. But there's just something so striking about a person who walks into their room and the back is straight, their shoulders are, all the way aligned down, and they walk in with purpose and they demand and they command attention. And I mean, seeing as and we are confessing here, the guys have already started with their confession.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
But we do see, that conventional beauty, and we really cannot run away from that because we're also so conditioned. I mean, not too long ago, women were straight women. were so obsessed with yellowbone men, and now we're like, we don't want that. We want some of that dark chocolate. So I mean, those are also trends. You know, you want that dark chocolate, tall beard. Now that is good looking, but 20, 30 years ago, a light skinned man was good looking. We still have colorism when it does come to women, and so on the sense that light skinned or what they call yellowbone is still very attractive. But I think with all of those, it really is about the energy that someone brings in. Because I think for me, that's what makes someone very attractive. That's what makes someone very pretty, either male or female. How they walk into the room. Because in my mind, I'm curious. Why are they walking so confidently? So why are they claiming the room, owning the space? There must be something interesting about them, and I am drawn to them. A pretty face, great. A good-looking man, conventionally great. But really, for me, it is about the energy, and that's how I'm drawn to that person, because they really probably had to do a lot of digging and a lot of working on themselves to get to that point where they're so confident. Because constantly, if you're getting on social media or if you're just around in spaces, there's a pulling down, there's an insecurity, because a lot of money is made from insecurities. And then we develop consumerism behavior where you just want to put things on or buy things to hide and come across as confident. So that for me is definitely what I see as pretty and what I find very attractive.
A lot of money is made from insecurity. Yikes. Okay, Miss Madame, we hear you. I'm going to turn to Yaya for a second here. You're a model. You have to apply yourself in the realms of confidence. There is no way you're in front of the camera and looking shy. It's not make sure, my sister. With that being said, have you found that this consistent practice of gauging you for you has made you stand out in rooms?
Yeah, also it's Yaya Mawande.
Ma'am.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Like I always tell people, I sell confidence. That is my job. You know, I don't think that if I wasn't as confident as I am, I would have made it this far into the industry, because I get criticized a lot for the way that I look, because unfortunately I have subjected myself to that. So, you know, it is me to be confident and to sell confidence to women, and to also just sort of help a lot of women to find that confidence, because I didn't have a Yaya growing up. You know, I didn't have a representation. And also I think because there wasn't a Yaya to represent beauty in the industry, I was told a lot growing up that if you were to just lose a little bit of weight, you would be so much more pretty. You know, I had to find my own voice. I had to, you know, work on myself and understand that there's so much more to beauty than what we see and what is sold to us, you know, by the Western world. And yeah, I'm just really happy, and I'm glad that I can actually, you know, be that for younger girls and other women, and be the voice of the average African woman, because we don't have a lot of voices for ourselves in the industry. You know, I still struggle. I consider myself a very beautiful woman, but I still have to work very hard to be where I am. I still have to, I still believe that I have to work twice as hard than the average model, simply because I am the African shape. You know,
Yeah.
I'll go into a space with a person that is a straight model, and even though I know that I'm very qualified for a certain you know, character at a casting, but because I carry a little bit more weight, I have to put in extra in the confidence, in the speaking, in the appearance, in the dressing up, in the makeup, in the hair, than a woman who is straight and skinny, who can just wake up, comb out their hair, put a little bit of eyeliner and lip gloss, and just go to a casting.
Sure. With that being said, gentlemen, I want to turn to you for a second. I want to look at the closing remarks of this conversation, and I'm going to do this in question form. Right? The reality is that a woman's beauty is purposed. Right? It belongs to her. She did not design herself. And so the reality is, it is with intention that I believe the creator pieced her the way she did, or pieced her the way he did. With that in mind and in context, how do we begin the conversation around men reforming the way they think? I think it was Karabo who said that it's a very dull way of thinking coming from men when it comes to viewing women in the lens of what they look like or how they present themselves, I think is what we've come to understand. And so how do we reform that thinking? Do you think there's a necessity to reform that thinking?
The necessity, yes, but the willingness, no. And I'm sorry, you just touched on the creator part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Where even if you go and look into the Bible, it even goes as saying that Sarah was a very pretty woman. So prettiness has always existed. There's always been a division of pretty and unpretty. And unfortunately, are we willing to change? I doubt. And pretty is currency. As much as you can look at it, when you go into the modeling space, it's currency. You can't take the average looking woman and say, maybe you go take a chance, listen to a few videos of TD Jakes and you get inspired and get motivated and you can be able to win. No, it will not work that way.
Yeah.
Beauty is what sells. And earlier on, one of the ladies was speaking about makeup, and I saw Simphiwe shake his head about makeup. We're different in how we perceive beauty. I personally, I love makeup. I like hairpiece. My friends call me, I love plastic. And I said, yes. And simply would be different because when they said that makeup, he was shaking his head, I was like, okay, we differ. So that was just one of my observations to say that when also we perceive beauty, we also perceive beauty different from a different lens. To say that he wants them natural. I said, if you come to me natural, I'll definitely overlook you. I'll look at the one behind you with the Peruvian. You understand? I'll look at the one behind you with the Revlon blush.
Come on.
So there's it differs from eye to eye, and unfortunately, it's something that will not go away. And the perception of pretty women are bimbos, it's forever going to be there. So also, pretty women don't have to work much to get stuff, but also pretty women have to work hard to keep stuff because there's a perception of when you got there because of pretty privilege. But unfortunately, to say that it's going to end very soon, I doubt that's going to happen.
Sure. There is a statement coming in from Todd Jenkins on TikTok saying that we're not here for a long time, so you might as well wake up to a pretty woman. Simphiwe, I'm going to leave you with that statement and gauge your thought and view. And I'm saying this, of course, giving you an opportunity to reflect on the conversation that has been, but looking at that statement that proves to be true for very many men.
Look, there's certain things we'd like to change about life. This also goes like with conversations of equality amongst men and women. I know it's also like a very big debate, but I mean, I would often say things like we're equal as human beings, but men have their things, women have their things, and we can't change that. And to try and force matters is asking for a bit too much, if you ask me. I think there's nothing we can do with what or how we see the world, right? I can't wake up tomorrow and force someone else to do not see beauty. I don't know how else to reframe it. But what I can say is that, like, personally, there's always a way in that we can all internalize and lead our lives, lead with love, lead with humility, lead with kindness, and all of those things. And that will ultimately help you be a better person and help those around you be better people and view the world differently and not necessarily look at someone firstly through aesthetics or aesthetically, so it changes. I'll give you a little bit of a story. I don't know if it would make sense, but I was out with a friend of mine once and he said to me, if these guys didn't have money, we would be with those girls. And I said, because he's like, no, they use money to get girls. I'm like, well, you use your beauty to get girls. They can't now sit there and be like, if these guys were not handsome, we would be those girls. We all have our pros and cons.
Yeah.
There's God-given things that we all have, and then there's things that chow us up. Like I genuinely believe, like I'm a little bit of a handsome guy. However, I don't approach people thinking that, I never lead with that. but I can't say I don't look in the mirror and admit that I'm not too bad. But it's not the first thing that I lead with. I always want to come across as confidence, because in reality, I'm also very insecure, profusely insecure. But you'll never know that if I don't tell you. But when I am around people, or I'm around people that I need to impress, I have to put my game face on. I have to
Hmm.
be in character, all of that. But in reality, it doesn't matter how I look. I've got so many insecurities that I wouldn't even know where to start. But ultimately, there's a project to sell. We're all selling. You're selling a radio show. Other people are selling beauty. Other people are selling books. I sell production. My thing is to make things look good on TV. And again, it's all looking good, looking nice. It's always about that aesthetic eye. How make it look better. Don't let it be average. You know what I mean? So the long and short of it, I think the world is the way it is. That there's certain ways we can lead our lives, but some things we won't change.
I'm going to come to you, Sibabalwe. Very interestingly enough, there is a comment, something that's passed on in social spaces, that states that there are no ugly billionaires. Right? There's no such thing. It does not exist. Does that tie into the confidence element? Yes, no, maybe. And I want your response to be twofold. I think first addressing that, and then secondly, just addressing a girl who is watching this. Perhaps your 22-year-old self, who's yet to venture into this world, this concrete jungle, and sort of find their place in space.
That's true. I think, we touched on the Bible, and it seems as though I'm gauging the room and we're Christian here. But fundamentally, if we are looking at what is the word? It's late at night, English bundles, heterosexual relationships. There we go. If we are look at heterosexual relationships, and we go to the fundamentals of the Bible, it says that the man is the provider, which means that women will always be looking for a sense of security that the finances bring. So therefore, if you are that billionaire, and then it means that there's some security. So when you do come and talk to me, and I know that you're a billionaire, I am hooked. And then it's then your personality and everything that comes into it that will then make me stay. So I mean, I'm glad we went there, because fundamentally, we view different things as important. I think Karabo touched on that. We have preferences, we have priorities about what we like, what we don't like. The other gentleman said, he's going to skip an Afro for Peruvian, his preference. No one's allowed to shoot him down for that as well. So I mean, if you were to come to me, there is no ugly billionaire. Also, because I'm an entrepreneur, there is
Yeah.
a reason why I'm an entrepreneur, to make lots and lots of money.
Yes, ma'am.
But to also make a difference, and to also just bring job security into my own country, and make quite an impact in the space that I'm in. And then I didn't quite, if you clarify that a question around the 22-year-old, please.
And,
My
and
22-year-old
address.
self.
Essentially, you're just addressing your 22-year-old self who's yet to venture into this world of entrepreneurship. And with these complexities that currently exist, pretty privilege and the like, what would you say to them?
Um, I think I'd go back to my earlier statement. Pretty privilege. If you think you are pretty, use your pretty privilege to get into rooms. Your content is going to carry you through. You can get into a room and get out of it, bring no value, put no value to the table, and that's it. You've actually wasted your time. So you've gone out with a minus. But if you do know that you've got the content, walk in quite, confidently into that room, and use your pretty privilege to get into it. But then it's about what you do and what you say when you're in that room. So for me, for instance, when I meet with, if I'm meeting with a man who's in a position of power, and I'm pitching something, I'm pitching us to do PR work, or I'm pitching for sports work. If I hear that, oh, this one likes pretty woman, oh, I am already happy, because half the job is done. I know I'm a very smart woman. I know I've got an amazing portfolio. So the
Yeah.
hardest things are already behind me, I've done. So if me showing up in a full face speech, looking very gorgeous, that, oh, I love it. If I hear that this one likes pretty girls, then I will dress up, because I know that the content will impress him even more, and it makes my job a lot easier. I mean, we need to stop shaming the fact that, oh my god, she's pretty or this or that. No, women actually need to use their strength. It's just like men do. They use their flashy cars, they use their networks, they use where they are, they use their well-fitted suits to try and impress women, and no one shames that. But it seems as though when a woman acknowledges that I am pretty and I can use my pretty privilege, but the extent is totally up to you. And as I said earlier, depends what you do, how you do it, and if you can sleep at night, completely up to you. But I would definitely tell my 22-year-old self that, sweetheart, you are smart, you're hardworking, you can achieve everything. You've been preordained to get everything that you want. So use your pretty privilege and use your brain that God has given you, your wisdom and your knowledge to stay in the room.
Yaya, we are going to end off this conversation with you. The best for last, right? The best for last. I want you to speak to the woman who cannot stand her image outside makeup, because that's another problem, right? It's an issue. You will find women who cannot present themselves anywhere without having some kind of face, even if it's a little bit of an eyeliner, something just for vibe check. And I'm saying this because more and more, when you look at yourself in the mirror and all you see is this recreated or nuanced or enhanced version of yourself, you begin to lose, I want to say, a bond with what you really look like outside that context. And so for the woman who struggles to walk without makeup, the woman who feels like, listen, I am my prettiest when I am my most made up, what would you say to her?
I'm going to be completely honest and completely vulnerable. I feel like such a hypocrite for what I am about to say, because I actually am that woman. I feel so much more prettier when my face is made up. I feel like I make more sense to myself when my face is made up. I think at first it came from a place of insecurity because, like I said, I've always been a big girl. I grew up a big girl, and I was a big girl surrounded by skinny women. And I never really got, reassurance about my looks until I had to start reassuring myself. And now I'm at a place where I use makeup not to enhance my beauty, but because I absolutely love makeup, but I do sometimes feel like I need the makeup to make myself look more beautiful, because I've been conditioned to feel like and to think that as a big woman, you're beautiful but, or you're beautiful for a big girl. I would tell women that there's so much more to yourself and who you are than the looks, and do not let society sort of sway you from what you consider beautiful. There's so many things that make up people, and we are so much more than the sums of ourselves, and we just need to just keep digging deep, and we need to be more patient and more kind and apply so much more grace towards each other. And this is something that I try to do to myself every day. I try to apply so much grace to myself because I am my biggest critic. I literally am my biggest critic. As much as I am this thick, fabulous plus size model, but I wake up every day and I feel like I have to go to the gym, because if I don't go to the gym, then I'm not going to look good. Do you know what I mean? I need to go to the gym. I need to come back. I need to install my wig. I need to do my makeup, because there's this facade that I am trying to keep up with to look good. And there's so much more to life than all of that. And I feel like as women especially, we just need to be kinder to ourselves. But unfortunately, the men that we unfortunately love do not make it easy for us to just be pretty little boys and look at each other man to man with our natural hair and our bare faces.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. So I really feel like as women, we just need to be kinder to each other and to ourselves, and apply a little bit more grace to each other, and just, show yourself a bit more love. Affirm yourself, look at yourself in the mirror if you have to, and be like, yes, you are that girl, you're beautiful, you're smart, you don't need a validation. I think that validating ourselves is probably harder than getting validation from the next person. And it's something that I really believe that we really need to work hard on. And that's because I am sort of atting myself, because I know for a fact that I don't validate myself as much as I should. And therefore, someone else's validation sort of matters a little bit more, because I don't give myself the validation that I know that I should, and I know that I need to sort of
Yeah. I think we are slightly losing you there, Yaya. However, thank you so much for being that vulnerable with us. In actual fact, all of you, you're still a guest this evening. Yaya, Karabo, Simphiwe, and lastly, of course, Sibabalwe joining us this evening. Thank you a ton to all of you for giving us your thoughts, your views, your gauge on what pretty privilege is about, from the highs to the lows and all things in between. I'd love to thank you all for joining us this evening. If you have just joined us, it is 10 minutes before the show comes to an end. Just a summary of who those high-profile individuals are. Karabo Moshoeshoe is an entrepreneur and author. Simphiwe Mabaso is a video editor with a background in sports and storytelling. Sibabalwe Sesmani is a group CEO of Unorthodox Group. And then Yaya Mawande is a model and entertainment industry insider. And that is how we sum up conversations here on Hotlines. If you want to continue talking about this, find us on YouTube. We currently have an audio visual running live, and it will be there till the end of the I want to say end of days, but then I realize I don't know if I can say that. But for the most part, we know that we'll find it there tomorrow and next week and the week after next. And so feel free to continue conversations on that front. For now, we get into the music.